the cat. We're on the belly side, so this is the ventral view. Now, if we take a look at the muscles of the neck, which is where we'll start first, we have two muscles that we need to identify. We have one muscle, remember the bones, we had our breastbone or our sternum. So coming from the sternum, going to the mastoid process behind the ear, we have our sternomastoid muscle, the outer V, sternomastoid muscle. Going from our sternum to our hyoid bone, we have the inner V, known as our sternohyoid muscle. The two parallel muscles here are going to be your sternohyoid. These two muscles over here, sternomastoid, from sternum to mastoid process. Sternomastoid, and the two parallel sternohyoid. Continuing down to the muscles of the chest area, on the right ventral side, we have our shoulder muscle. Remember, in the human, our shoulder muscle is called our deltoid. Shoulder muscle is called our deltoid. And in the cat, we have three divisions, three different names. But the one we're looking at right now covers our clavicle. So this is called our clavodeltoid muscle. Clavodeltoid. The division of your clavodeltoid goes all along here. Clavodeltoid, clavodeltoid. First of your chest muscles, you have an extra muscle that we don't see in the human on the cat. This muscle is called our pecto-antebrachialis. It's a chest muscle, which it's what pectoralis stands for. So pecto-antebrachialis inserts on your brachialis muscle. So pecto-antebrachialis. Clavodeltoid, pecto-antebrachialis. Here we see our pectoralis major. Pectoralis major. So pecto-antebrachialis, pectoralis major. Continuing down, we have our larger pectoralis minor. So in the cat, pectoralis major is smaller than the larger pectoralis minor. Here, going from our, remember on our sternum, we have the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. Coming from the xiphoid process of the sternum, inserting on our humerus bone, our upper arm bone, we have our xiphi-humeralis muscle, xiphi-humeralis muscle. So from the posterior position or bottom portion, so superior or anterior portion, we have our xiphi-humeralis muscle, pectoralis minor, pectoralis major, pecto-antebrachialis, pecto-antebrachialis, and our clavodeltoid. Clavodeltoid, pecto-antebrachialis, pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, and xiphi-humeralis. Continuing down upon the abdomen, we see the following muscles. We have four muscles that you have to know. You have your external oblique, and notice, try to look for the striations. Your external oblique, just like in the human, the striations run down. Striations run down. So external oblique, the striations should be running like so. All this muscle is your external oblique. If you look to the bottom portion here, you see that the striations are running up towards the heart or the head. This whole muscle would be known as your internal oblique. Neither one of these muscles have to be dissected out in order to be asked. So they can have a pin here, external oblique. All this is your external oblique. And they can have a pin here. Name this muscle internal oblique. Now, underneath your external oblique and somewhat under your internal oblique, you have muscles with striations running completely across from left side to the right side. All this muscle is your transverse abdominis. Transverse abdominis muscle. So from innermost to outermost, or from deep to superficial muscles, you have your transverse abdominis. You have your internal oblique, and the most superficial, you have your external oblique. Running straight from the top to the bottom, you have your rectus abdominis muscle, your six-pack. Rectus abdominis muscle. So they could have a pin here, name this muscle, rectus abdominis, or they could have a pin here, name this muscle, internal oblique. So be very careful. If striations run straight from top to bottom, it's rectus abdominis in the center. If the striations run up or somewhat medially, diagonally, you have your internal oblique. Now continuing with the muscles of the leg.
Good.
Muscles of the leg. Here we see the superficial muscles of the leg. The lateral one is going to be called your sartorius muscle. This whole muscle is your sartorius muscle. Superficial muscle on the lateral side, sartorius. So the medial portion, you have your gracilis muscle. Gracilis. So gracilis in the center and sartorius on the side. So sartorius muscle. Now we're going to lift up our sartorius and see what we see. So we have our sartorius muscle. Underneath our sartorius, you see we have our tensor fascia latae. You'll always see the fascia attached to it. So tensor fascia latae. So we lifted up our sartorius muscle. We're lifting up our tensor fascia latae and retracting it backwards. We see the muscles of the upper thigh, or the thigh, which are called our quadriceps. Quad means four, so you know that there's four muscles. Here we have our vastus medialis muscle. Vastus medialis. In the center, this whole muscle here is our rectus femoris. So the most lateral position, we have our vastus lateralis. Vastus medialis, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis. Putting our tensor fascia latae back down and covering it with our superficial muscle, our sartorius. Again, sartorius, tensor fascia latae, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, all this, and vastus lateralis. Putting our tensor fascia latae back down, our sartorius. Going to the medial portion, or muscles of the leg, we have our gracilis muscle. We're going to retract the gracilis back, and we expose the following muscles. We have our semitendinosus, which comes back from the dorsal side of the body. So semitendinosus. All this muscle here is our semimembranosus. So first we see our semitendinosus, then we see our semimembranosus. Adductor femoris, no adductor magnus, so semitendinosus, semimembranosus, adductor femoris. This one right here, adductor longus, pectineus, and next to your sartorius muscle you have your iliopsis. Again, we have our semitendinosus, semimembranosus, adductor femoris, adductor longus, pectineus, and iliopsis. Now let's take a look at the other side. Here we see our sartorius. Sartorius. Here's our tensor fascia latae, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis. Vastus medialis, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, tensor fascia latae, sartorius, gracilis. Here we see our gastrocnemius, our calf muscle, gastrocnemius, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, adductor femoris, adductor longus, pectineus, and tiny one up here, iliopsis.